It is the appointed hour of 1:30. We will call the Cumberland County Finance meeting to order, and we will begin with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Nieder.
I am here.
Commissioner Fashi.
I'm here.
Commissioner Eichelberger.
All right, we will open the floor up to any public comment. There's no one in the room for that, I don't believe today. Is there anyone online?
No public comment.
No public comment, okay. We'll go on to the approval of the minutes of the August 21st, 2024 meeting. Someone like to make a motion to that? I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We have one topic of discussion today, and that is the 2025 preliminary budget. We have Keri Finkenbinder and Ron Snow here to make the presentation. Thank you, folks, and we'll just turn it over to you.
That sounds good. So welcome to the August 28th Financial Analysis Committee presentation. The focus of today's presentation is the 2025 budget. So during today's presentation, we'll show you our budget timeline. We'll talk about the process we use to review departmental budgets. We'll take a look at the general fund 2025 preliminary budget, the total county 2025 preliminary budget. We'll take a look at budgeted positions, as well as talk about our contingency and how we use it. So keep in mind that the numbers you'll see today are a snapshot in time. These numbers have changed, and they will continue to change for several weeks. Reason being is we are currently working through and reviewing departmental budget requests. We expect to have our first review of the department budget request done by the end of this week. And then what we'll do is we'll take a secondary look at those as well after we're done with the first. So the focus of today, as I mentioned, is the preliminary 2025 budget. But I do want to touch briefly on our projections. Projections and budget do go hand in hand, but there are some differences. So the numbers you'll see today will vary from the projections we showed you back in July at our previous presentation. So we feel that the projections that we showed you back in July are still materially correct. We don't see any major shifts at this time. So budget itself is very structured, it's very detail oriented, it's very systematic. Projections allow us to look at things at a higher level. So there are some differences, and you'll see the differences in our budget to our projections. And there's a couple of major things. The first thing is contingency. So contingency is a line item in our budget. We don't necessarily add all of the contingency into our projections. So part of our contingency is for unanticipated expenses, operating expenses, or unanticipated capital projects that might come up during the year. And then part of our contingency allows finance. So sorry, contingency is managed by the finance department. It's not in departmental budgets. Also, contingency allows us to process month-end, year-end expense accruals. Another difference between our projections and budget is capital projects. So we are planning capital projects in June, July, and August for things that are going to happen in the next calendar year, somewhere between January and December. So we're budgeting for those in our now 2025 budget. We know that some of those projects may not happen at all. Some of those projects may get started and not get finished in 2025. So we know that some of those projects may get rolled from 25 to 26. We also know that some projects may come online that we are not anticipating. So our projections allow us to not look at things so detailed, but at a higher level. So it allows us to hone in our numbers a little bit. Similar to capital projects is salary and benefits. When we develop the salary and benefit budget, we start with our complement of positions. And we look at what positions we anticipate to be filled and for how long during the year. That's used to develop our budget. With projections, we know that there's going to be some level of turnover that happens. In addition to turnover, there's going to be a lag time of filling those positions. So again, our projections allow us to hone in those numbers a little bit.
Ron, on that, and I appreciate you taking time to walk through that because it is important. The contingency information that you have been providing to us monthly, which I appreciate, and capital projects. Some of those projects have been approved in prior cycles.
Correct.
And have been deferred until this year. So I get how fluid this process is, and I think that, you know, our regular meetings have been very helpful to keep us in that loop. The one thing though, when you talk about those, clearly that's the area when we're facing challenging times, we look very hard at and can sometimes obtain additional funding for. So those you cannot project at this point in time. So thank you.
So our projections give us some flexibility where budget does not. So we're using our projections then to make recommendations based on our expectations, not necessarily what is budgeted for. Okay. So here we have our budget timeline. So the budget cycle for us is a year-round cycle. There's very little time during the year where we're not working on the next budget. So early in the year, February to May, we're working on our fiscal budgets, and that's our state-funded human service departments. That budget is historically placed on view in early May, is then formally approved in early June, and becomes available for those fiscal departments to use that budget starting July 1st. Calendar budget cycle starts in May and runs through the remainder of the year. This year, we are scheduled to have our 2025 calendar budget placed on view on November 13th, with calendar budget approval on December 11th.
So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit our budget review process. So before budgets are sent out to departments for their entry, finance will pull salary and benefit information from Lawson into Questica. We then adjust pay schedules in Questica to reflect union contracts and estimated wage scale adjustments. We also estimate benefit rates for the following year. And we go through and check all positions and benefits to make sure everything is calculating correctly before those are available for departments to view. Finance will also enter all internal expenses for departments. For example, the Cronus chargeback to all departments will enter those amounts for the departments. So then once budgets are available for departments, the departments then review their salary and benefit information and let finance know if they expect any changes in benefit coverages. If they know of any retirements for the next year, we'll move that position down to a step 1, because most likely when they hire the new position, they'll start at the bottom of the scale where the retiree is probably towards the top. Departments also enter all of their revenue and expense budgets based on prior year trends, and then they'll also add any budget for known expenses that are changing for the next year. Departments also submit position concept forms to our department that we forward on to HR. Just because a department submits a position request for the next year, we do not budget for those until they're formally approved by the board. Departments also submit capital concept forms and estimated conference costs to our department. So once the department is finished reviewing their budget, they'll submit it to finance for our review, and finance will go through line by line of every department's budget and analyze the change in from the prior year budget or changes from prior year actuals. And then we will work with departments if we notice anything seems out of line and question why things are changing and adjust as necessary. Something new that we've started this year is we created a budget review guide and a review checklist to create a more uniform review process among our staff, but also allow us to have the documentation for following years so we can go back and see why changes were made.
That's good. That's good. I'm excited.
So we all had our own way of documenting it. Now it's similar among all of us, so it's easier to read for everyone. So then after budgets are reviewed by the finance office, we meet with all the departments. This is a new concept for 25. So in the past, we would meet with maintenance, public safety, IMTO, and the prison to talk about their 10-year capital plans and major changes in their departments, since those are bigger general fund departments. This year now we are meeting with all departments and doing them in small groups and talking about these changes among all departments. So it's not just the larger ones.
Perfect. Thank you.
So then these are our 2025 preliminary general fund budget numbers.
Keri, can I ask one question before you jump into the numbers? So when you were projecting for salary and benefits, and I apologize, I seem to have gotten a little bit of a tickle here. Is there any outside information that you're looking toward? For example, there's a lot of the job market is appearing as though it may be a little bit tougher in 25, and we may not see the turnover that we've experienced in 24 or 23. Is there anything like that you're factoring into some of the projections that you're using?
So we look at prior year trends and see what our staffing levels are and kind of base it off of what we've seen in prior years.
Okay.
But
I didn't know if you used any outside sources for other.
We do kind of keep our eye on what's happening in the market. And if something is majorly shifting, we do account for it.
Okay. Do you have another question?
Nope. Very good. Thank you.
So then for our 2025 general fund budget, currently our general fund budgeted revenue is at 103.8 million and budgeted expenses are at almost 129 million. We have one-time money in there to offset some of these expenses at about 13.7 million, which brings our budgeted difference to around 11.4 million. That one-time money consists of county grant program funding, fund balance management, and there's $3 million in there that is for external projects outside of the county.
ARPA money.
One time.
Yeah. And so in that deficit, the projected budget difference of 11 million, there was 3 million in contingency.
Yes.
6.8 in capital, and I know you supplied a capital schedule. And of that capital, the list of the capital budget for 25, it looks like 14 million of that was supplied by a bond, some grant funding. Is that in this 6.8 figure?
So the total capital that you see back there is across all departments, not just the general
And
fund.
these are just the ones.
These are just general fund capital projects.
So those have received funding potentially in that list of 911 bond funding or the grant program.
So the 911 bond funding that would be in the total county capital, not in this 6.8 million.
Okay, so the other 2, 3 of the 16 that's there.
The
So the-
emergency telephone, the 2 capital bridge programs would not be in the general fund.
Okay, everything else would be. Okay, thank you.
Lawson is also not.
Oh, you're right, Lawson is also not.
The 1.9 million is not in the general fund.
Okay.
But some of that other funding to offset the 6 million in capital is county grant program funding for projects.
Okay.
There's about 3.5 million in that. And we are, like Ron said, still in our, almost finishing up our first round review and doing a second review. So these numbers could shift after these reviews and with meeting with departments.
And so the subsidy of 17 million is the number that you're capturing, and that is what the general fund is potentially going to have to provide to fund the shortfalls that we're experiencing in things like the MH department and the 911.
Yes.
So then this next slide is just a visual representation of how the general fund budget revenue is split. The majority of the revenue does come from real estate tax, about 70%. The next slide shows then the breakdown of our general fund expense budget. And the majority of expenses come from salary, benefits, and operating costs.
Has this remained relatively consistent year over year? If you put 24, 23, 22, are you just going to see the subsidy number growing or operating growing?
I'll put a disclaimer on this. It depends on if one-time money is in or out. That has really skewed our numbers over
And
the past few
percentages.
years.
Okay.
Our salary and benefits, when we get to actuals, normally run in between 45% and 50%.
Okay.
I was gonna say, so when I compared it to 2019, so this chart here still has 3 million in there of one-time money. But if you take the 3 million out, our percents are pretty close to what 2019 split was.
Okay.
Budgets or actual?
Budgets. Some major changes in the 2025 general fund budget. These are all compared to 2024 budget. Salaries are increasing about 2.2 million, which is about 5%. Prison medical services is increasing around 738,000. The countywide action plan is increasing 1.2 million. This is the watershed implementation program to clean up the Chesapeake Bay, and this has an offsetting revenue. So you'll see the 1.2 increase in expense and revenue. Our transfer out to the county grant program is decreasing 12 million from 24, and this is for the external projects, and the majority of those should be completed by the end of this year. Subsidy is increasing 763,000. This is due mainly to 911 projects. This includes the radio projects and any additional projects they're doing. Capital is decreasing around 3.4 million or 29%. And this is due to the completion of the firearms lab at the end of this year, and the prison chillers and Stanley security system were completed this year. So I just want to talk a little bit more about contingency. We have the 2.9 million budgeted for contingency. All general fund capital projects are kept in contingency until they're approved either by the chief clerk or board of commissioners. The only capital we keep within departmental budgets are for maintenance, IMTO, any projects that have already been approved, grant funded projects, and farmland preservation stays in their department as well. Our contingency is also used for any like just in case instances for departments. So if a department expects we don't want departments budgeting for extra costs because they think it could happen. We want them to budget for expenses that are almost definitely known. Anything that they're not unsure of, we will pull back into contingency until they would actually need it. And like Ron said, finance does manage the contingency accounting units and will move money to departments as needed.
I do think, I mean, as I said, we've been discussing contingency and getting more information on that throughout the year, but I think that that's an area where we're going to just have to continue to watch a little bit more closely as to what's released from that scope. I get it for the smaller things that need to be handled easily, but the larger ones I think that we're we're gonna have to be more engaged with.
So then our 2025 total county budget, we have budgeted revenue around 269.8 million and budgeted expenses at 309 million. We also have some additional impacts of one-time money and other funding sources to offset some of those expenses. The 13.7 million of one-time money is the same amount you saw with the general fund to offset those expenses. But this slide also has other funding sources, and this is using any departments that have a fund balance to offset some of those costs. And that's around 14.4 million, bringing our budget difference to the 11.4 million. So then some of our major changes in the total county budget, construction costs are increasing around 2.5 million. And this is due again to those countywide action plans and the conservation excellence grant. Our transfer out to CADIC is increasing around 550,000. And this is due to the increase in the hotel tax rate from 3% to 5%. Self-insurance claims, we're projecting an increase about 1.7 million. We've had some relatively low claims years the past few years, so I'm expecting to see an increase in those for next year, potentially. And then computer software is increasing about 1.4 million, and this is due to the Boston upgrade. So this slide is showing you the 2025 capital projects that were submitted that are over $100,000. So that first grouping is capital projects that have been approved and are budgeted for. A majority of these projects do have other funding sources besides the general fund. The next grouping is submitted capital projects that have not been formally approved. So these are they're in budget but not approved yet by the commissioners.
Right, so on this side, is a snapshot of our budgeted positions for 2025. So starting on the full-time line and then going from left to right, we have 969 full-time positions. Of those, 959 of them are budgeted for. And that equates to 950 full-time equivalents. Of those 950 full-time equivalents, 595 are in the general fund, and 355 are in other funds. Then on the part-time line, we have 116 positions. 87 of them are budgeted for, which equates to just under 30 full-time equivalents. And the reason for that is not all, so part-time positions can vary in how many hours they're budgeted for. Could be 10, could be 100, could be 900. Of the 30 full-time equivalents, 20.77 are in the general fund and 9 are in other funds. Then moving on to the next bullet, we have 47.8 vacant full-time equivalents. 28.87 are in the general fund and 18.94 are in other funds.
How many total employees do we have today?
Total employees or total positions?
Well, let's go with positions.
We have 1,085 positions.
Positions.
Yes.
And they're filled.
No.
No. How many are filled?
We would have to,
It's a little, the last time I checked the numbers was a little over 1,000. Is it 1,010 or 1,020? I don't know the exact number.
Thank you.
So Ron, I mean, I guess that's the question that I would ask. So we know we have as full-time positions 969, but we are budgeting 959. And below we're saying essentially with of all those full-time positions, if we have this 47.8, and I'll just round that up to 48
Yep.
Vacant, that's really 21 vacancies of those positions, and we're budgeting that, you know, we're only budgeting for 10 being vacant. So we have some room in our budget for positions that we expect to be out there for a while, and as we fill some and replace others, but you are budgeting some element of vacancy, it appears. It's small. It's not the 48 positions, but you're budgeting for some vacancy, it looks like.
And the 48 positions are positions that are vacant in budget.
Right, so some of them could have been filled. It's based on when we downloaded budget. They could have been vacant when we downloaded and then were filled after.
Okay.
So we download in around the end of May. So if they have been filled since May, they're probably not in here.
But others could become vacant.
Right.
So it's, I know, it's a moving
It's
target.
a moving target. And this is an area that is kind of the next steps of, we need to do a little more analysis
Okay.
of. And then the last bullet point, as Keri mentioned earlier, there's a process for departments to submit to finance a position concept paper when they are expecting or they think they may be asking for new positions. So during the fiscal budget process, we received 9 full-time positions. Now, understand that was back in May and June. So some of those positions may have come to salary board for formal action at this point. And then with our calendar budget for 2025, we have position concept papers for five part-timers and 1 full-time. And like Keri mentioned earlier, these are not budgeted for until formal action is taken by salary board.
Right.
Except children and youth, because we budget based on a needs-based budget.
So Dana, having said that, some of these 9 full-time positions, I know that we recently have filled, we have expanded some positions in children and youth. Could those have been some of these 9 full-time positions?
Yes, I think it
They
was.
were, okay,
I think 6 of those 9 were children.
okay. And generally speaking, I know that there are some differences in, when we are hiring at children and youth, we are receiving basically 80% coverage of those costs,
80 to 100.
80 to 100.
Yeah.
So the positions that we fill in children and youth, I don't mean to say it this way, but are somewhat of a bargain from our perspective in that they are very fully subsidized versus some of our other departments.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think when Nikki came, she was very clear about that. And why she needed employees on that level. So,
Okay, so next steps, we're gonna continue to finish up our first round of reviews of the department budget requests. Again, once we're finished with that first round, we'll dive in and do a second double check. We'll be updating the real estate and library tax revenue. And we'll take another look at the vacant positions. Harry mentioned earlier, we're in process of having departmental budget meetings. They're going very well. We're probably about 1/3 of the way through that process now. That'll continue through September, and I think the last one is maybe early October. Once we're finished with changing numbers, then we'll start our preparation of the strategy and budget book and the companion budget briefing. Our next presentation is November 6th. So that will be an update of the 2025 budget, as well as an update of our 5-year projections. The projections we showed you back in July had 2024 financials through May. These updated projections will have updated financials through September. Then it's tight turnaround time to put the budget on view. November 16th or November 13th is when we're scheduled to go on view, and formal approval on December 11th. So then the last thing we want to do is pull up on the screen our interactive projection spreadsheet for you to take a look at. So this spreadsheet is a replica of what we showed you back in July. However, it's interactive. And there's two green lines that allow us to make changes and show you the results of those changes and the impacts that those changes have. The two changes that we're able to make is the first green line is a percentage change. And that percentage change can be either a increase to revenues, a decrease to expenses, or a combination of those two things. And the second line is use of one-time monies. So we have about $9.3 million of one-time monies that we could possibly allocate. And then so we can, that's also another input that we can change and show you the impacts of those changes. So as mentioned, this is the same scenario that we showed you back in July.
The only change is the $3 million for the 911 backup center. We had in our projections for May, we took it out of this spreadsheet, so that's the only change.
Okay, yeah, because there were too many questions surrounding that. There's not, that makes absolute sense. Thank you.
So under this scenario, we are maintaining 100 days of general fund, unassigned fund balance through 24 and 2025. Again, 100 days is not our target. It is our minimum.
Right. And Ron, I feel like if anyone is watching, I don't know, we need to spend just a moment to talk about that 100 days, because one of the criticisms that I've received over the past, year that I've been here was about us having that cash essentially on hand. And they didn't understand why when we were talking about we didn't have adequate funding and yet we had money. I don't know that people understand. This isn't like a normal business. The government is not like a normal business in that, if a guy comes out to repair my HVAC and they give me a bill, I generally am paying that bill 30 or 15 days. Oftentimes our funding it's not coming to us like that. And in order to continue services, we will be drawing down on those cash balances from time to time because we haven't yet received all of the funding that we may know is coming or expect to be coming. That can be 30, 60, 90 days or longer. And so we need these reserve funds to help smooth out those needs over the course of the year.
Absolutely.
And our quite frankly, our largest, our tax revenue really comes in at one point during the year as well. So I think that a lot of people have just asked me questions. Why do you need 100 days? So just want to make sure that you're in agreement.
Hit the nail on the head.
Thank you.
So what we're gonna have Brandon do is remove the one-time monies from the scenario. So we can see that we have a structural gap between our revenues and expenses currently anticipated for 2024. And then in 2026, we have a gap between our revenue and expenses of about $6.6 billion. So it will take a change of either increased revenues or decreased expenses of about 13% in 2025 to eliminate that structural gap. Now, as you can see in 2026, we still have a gap between revenues and expenses. So it would take another change of 1.1% in 2026. Even at that, 2027, we're still not maintaining 100 days and we still have a gap between revenues and expenses. So we just wanted to show you that we do have a structural gap between our revenues and expenses, and without some sort of change, we're going to quickly drop down below the minimum of 100 days.
So Ron, Brandon, if you could remove the changes that you had input and just have it be back to the 100 days. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, that you can take that out too. Just let it as that. So doing nothing in 2024 while we're projecting out about a shortfall of $1.4 million, but we are not using the $9 million of funds.
One-time monies.
So when I first came to this board, and I just want to make sure that I'm correct, we were staring at a $20 million deficit using $14 million of our one-time monies. So we have essentially been able to manage to a $1.4 million deficit, retaining 9 million. So that's darn good work.
Absolutely.
And that is really from everyone across the county. So 2025, I mean, quite frankly, we have adequate funding, one-time money to probably skate through 25 by your projections. If we just kind of go with things as budgeted. It's really 26, 27, 28 where we start to see it fall off the cliff.
And that kind of leads into, there's several different scenarios that address that out year difference. So Keri has a couple scenarios to show to you, unless you guys have specific scenarios you would like us to run through at this point.
I'm okay with
Yeah, you
can show us the way.
So there are a couple different options to go about it. You could either do one big increase or decrease in a year, or spread it out over multiple years to get the same almost effect at the end. So to start, so we'll keep the one-time money out and we'll do 13% in 25 and 5% in 26. This keeps us above the 100 days through 2028.
Again, I mean, just my initial glance at that, I mean, this is a difficult time for all taxpayers. And I am not interested in doing something like that. I am interested in trying to preserve one-time money as best we can without negatively impacting taxpayers. So I'm not going to be thinking.
And understand, these are not recommendations at this point.
Right, I
These
know,
are
you're
just-
playing
we're-
around and I appreciate
We're
it.
showing you how the
So,
spreadsheet works and possible.
Okay,
Right, yeah, so I'm gonna show you
Scenarios.
one where you do one big one in a year, or you do the same amount over 3 years. And just pay attention then to the number of days in the unassigned fund balance in 28. So with doing the 13% in 25 and 5% in 26, we're at about 119 days in 2028. But if we would do all 18% in 25, our 2028 days of unassigned fund balance is around 125. So since you made that change sooner, it had a positive impact on the out years.
yeah, and I can appreciate that. However, that holds everything else constant.
Yeah.
And that's just not realistic. So, I mean, you're showing an increased revenue based probably only on the tax going up.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be other sources of revenue, other decreases to expense.
Right.
Everything else is staying flatlined.
Well, not necessarily flatline, because there is growth built in to the other revenues. So we know that court costs and fines, interest are changing. Some of them are going up, some of them are going down. So all of that is already built into the
To our projections.
into the projections. Now, major fee increase may not be in there, but some fee increases will be.
Okay.
Another way to look at it would be to take 6% in 25, 26, and 27 to spread that 18% out. And it doesn't give you the same effect as doing larger ones at the beginning, but it's the same percent increase over the 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate doing something larger sooner should realistically help in the future. And unfortunately, that's why we were in the position where I believe we were forced to make the changes that we had to make now. If we had not done what we did for this year, I have no idea what amount of negative we would be staring at. And I don't know if there's a way you can could back that in. I mean, that would be
I think our number was about 28% last year, so it would be higher than that this year if nothing would have been done. If we would have used all the one-time money, that gap would have been last year's gap plus the gap that
Mhm.
exists now.
Yeah.
It's that one-time money
So,
kind of gets you it helps you, but if you don't have the plan for how you're going to
right.
respond, and that's why we're showing it to you this way, so you can see it without the effect of the one-time money. But we'll show you how the use of the one-time money actually flattens the need to do that, but you still have to have a plan for the out years.
Right. Agreed. And agreed. I will say though, it will be very interesting, I think, to see year-end actuals. Because as we've talked about, we've got actuals, projections, and budget, and there are three very different things in all of those, so.
But typically our projections come out relatively close
Yeah.
to our actuals unless something occurred that we didn't account for. For example, the one year we got extra MH money.
Right.
Well, when we were budgeting, we couldn't bank on that money. We didn't know it was coming. It was
Well, we can hope for those.
We can hope for
Again, we
those.
don't know that that's gonna happen. It's not really an action plan.
But normally our projections do come in
It's not.
relatively within reason.
Yeah.
So then, if we are below 100 days on the trip, we can insert some one-time money to help smooth that curve. So if we would put all the one-time money in 2024. That brings us back over the 100 days, which is our target. We could also taking the 6% out and keeping the one-time money in 24. And using that 18% again in 25. That drastically changes the out years.
Yeah.
Are there any other scenarios you wanted to see?
So Dana, to your point of revenue on this, that because incrementally, when you look at without having anything in it, the total general fund expense isn't going up that materially, like it doesn't appear to me. In 25, 111.5 to 111.8 to one, like that is a very small increase.
4.5%,
4.5, is that?
roughly.
But there's some projects coming out.
So I'm just saying it realistically, I don't know, I'm a little just cautious because we're just seeing expenses accelerating at rates greater than if it is 4.5%. I mean, we're seeing things just as everybody's experiencing, costing much more.
Correct.
So that's
And
a
we
concern.
will keep analyzing that and adjusting our projections based on what we see happening.
okay.
But we don't want to bake in that that's gonna continue to happen until 2028,
Correct.
because hopefully it doesn't.
Right.
Hopefully it reverses itself, but they're saying CPI is what, around 3%.
Right.
We're seeing higher increases
Yes.
in our expenses than that. And hopefully it's a trend that reverses quickly. So, but when they do the projections, they're doing different expense categories at different amounts based on what we're seeing. So some of them might be relatively flat and others might be going up 6%, but on average.
But we've even seen increases in some line items, I think probably as high, I mean, I know in some of the contracts we're seeing, it's 24%.
It is. The prison catastrophic was huge, and
So.
that's a big contract.
Yeah, it is. But those the MH contracts, some of those were very large, and our
Yeah,
children in youth, those contracts, the increases in those contracts are very, very high.
Can you show one more scenario where you spread the one-time money and then do?
Yeah.
So if you do the
So-
666
Yeah, but he didn't have the one-time money, in it, did it? I don't think.
and spread
Do
the
some-
one-time money 3 ways.
Yeah.
Rather than all in one
So-
year.
Spread the 9 million, so do. Go there. And then do like 2 million each year. Is that what you were saying?
No,
Spread
no,
that-
just do what you need to balance
Ah.
it. And I would change that last 6 to 5, just so it's not.
above 100 basis.
I mean, quite frankly, I think the trick is going to be hanging on to, I mean, because we're going to be continually pressed for more need. Hanging on to the one-time money.
And potentially using it for projects or something else.
Right. I mean, it still gets utilized, but it's how best to continue to utilize it is gonna be the challenge. When there's so many demands for it.
And our population continues to grow.
Yes.
I really love that you brought the tool that allows you to make these changes and show us in real time, right, what could happen. It's good.
Thank you.
It gives you the ability to kind of say, what would happen if?
Right.
And so we're more than happy to do the what would happen if scenarios with you.
We'll also be sending you a spreadsheet that you can use on your own to try different scenarios out.
Thank you.
And that available fund balance management line can actually go negative, like it's just there for you to see. So if you wanted to say, well, if we cut expenses by $4 million, you could just put $4 million in there, and even though it would adjust the spreadsheet for you,
Just the
right?
same.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Any questions?
You have answered so many of my questions, and I appreciate it very much, and I know I will have more, and the time that we spend having those meetings where we're really looking at the finances has been phenomenal, and I very appreciative.
And quite honestly, I want to thank you guys in finance because, you know, that improvement, I don't think would have happened without those meetings that we have been holding, looking at everything, you working with the departments to really try and make things as efficient as possible. So I appreciate all the work that you've been putting into this to make it all happen as well. Anything else? Any other questions of them? All right, Jean.
Well done, well done, thanks. I mean, I don't. No.
Is there any other business to come before the board at this time? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Adjourn.